Welcome to Battle Lines Journal. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating every day. After the U.S. Navy struck Houthi missiles in Yemen, a new round of attacks on merchant ships is underway. Attacks by Iranian-allied Houthi militias on ships in the region since November have affected companies and alarmed major powers. An escalation of Israel's more than 3-month-long war with Palestinian Hamas militants in Gaza. The Houthis say they're acting in solidarity with the Palestinians and have threatened to expand their attacks to include U.S. ships in response to American and British attacks on their facilities in Yemen. The Houthis have not stopped their attacks on ships in the Red Sea, despite the U.S. and its allies responding. As the U.S. National Security Council assesses the severity of the Houthi attacks, the Biden administration is trying to limit instability in the Middle East. However, attacks on merchant ships and attacks on U.S. forces by Iranian-backed militias are exacerbating tensions in the region. Iranian-backed Houthis launched a new attack on merchant ships just hours after the United States shot down missiles being prepared for launch in Yemen, according to a statement from U.S. Central Command. No injuries were reported from the commercial vessel, U.S. Central Command said. As the U.S. military launched new strikes against anti-ship ballistic missiles in Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen on Tuesday, a Greek ship was hit by a missile in the Red Sea. The Greek freighter Zographia was en route from Vietnam to Israel when it was hit the previous day. Officials reported only minor damage to the ship. The incident comes after the U.S. military announced last week that it had seized weapons supplied by Iran and destined for the Houthis during an operation. A Maltese-flagged, Greek-owned bulk carrier was hit by a missile 76 nautical miles northwest of the Yemeni port of Salif, while heading north in the Red Sea, a security firm and 2 Greek maritime ministry sources said. Yahya Saraya, the group's military spokesman, said that the Houthis in Yemen attacked the Zographia using naval missiles, resulting in a direct hit. A Greek source said the Zographia was sailing from Vietnam to Israel with 24 crew members and was empty when it was attacked. There were no injuries, only material damage, the source added. The ship is still sailing but is likely to change course for security checks. Underscoring the concerns, Japanese shipping operator Nippon Yusen 9101T, also known as NYK Line, has instructed its ships sailing near the Red Sea to wait in safe waters and is considering route changes, a company spokesman said. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saraya said the Zographia was targeted by naval missiles, resulting in a direct hit. The Greek-owned Malta-registered ship was empty and had 24 crew members on board. No injuries among the crew were reported, but a medium-sized fire broke out in the ship's hold, but the crew quickly extinguished the fire. The Red Sea is a very important transit point linking the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal. But some shipping companies have announced that they will now turn through the Cape of Good Hope to reach Europe. UK oil giant Shell is the latest company to indefinitely suspend all shipments through the Red Sea, according to U.S. officials. The U.S. says it's trying to ease tensions in the Middle East despite repeated U.S. military strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, "We are not looking for a regional conflict. We are far from it. Through a combination of consistent deterrence and determined diplomacy, we are trying to stop the spread of conflict and create the conditions for de-escalation," he said. But much will depend on Iran and its support for the militants, Sullivan added. Last day, the U.S. said it had shot down 4 anti-ship ballistic missiles that posed an imminent threat to U.S. Navy ships and commercial vessels in the Red Sea. But in the afternoon, the Houthis hit another merchant ship in the Red Sea. This is a sign that the group has not stopped its attacks on ships despite a series of U.S. strikes. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration is planning to put the Houthi rebels back on the U.S. list of terrorist organizations in an effort to cut off their financing and arms supplies, 2 U.S. officials said. The Biden administration removed the Houthis from 2 terrorist lists in 2021, reversing the decision of former President Donald Trump. The latest move would put the Houthis back on one of the two lists, labeling them as specially designated global terrorists. In recent days, the Houthis fired a succession of anti-ship cruise missiles at a U.S. Navy destroyer over the weekend, but the ship shot down the missile. The Houthis then struck a U.S. ship in the Gulf of Aden on Monday and a Maltese-flagged bulk carrier in the Red Sea on Tuesday. The attacks came even as U.S. and British ships and warplanes bombed more than 60 Houthi targets at 28 locations on Friday. Although the United States says the Houthis' subsequent naval attacks have been smaller and not as sophisticated as the earlier ones, the militant group appears to have not been deterred. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has also praised the group's actions. The Houthis have repeatedly said that they would attack ships belonging to Israel and its allies, but U.S. officials said most of the ships attacked had no connection to Israel. John Kirby, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, said in a statement that over the last few days, we've seen a number of smaller retaliatory attacks by the Houthis than we've seen before, none of which have been effective. Kirby said he believes it's too early to say that the continued Houthi attacks show that coalition strikes have not been effective. We believe we have had a good effect with these strikes in terms of disrupting and weakening their capability to conduct military offensive operations, Kirby said. The Biden administration has repeatedly emphasized that it does not want Israel's war with Hamas to escalate into a wider regional conflict. But Houthi attacks on merchant ships and continued attacks by Iranian-backed militias on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria show that instability in the Middle East already extends beyond Israel. While Iran is arming and supporting the Houthis, it's not clear how much it helped plan or direct the attacks. But Tehran launched its own attacks on Israeli interests late on Monday, firing a missile at a headquarters near the U.S. consulate in northern Iraq that it said belonged to the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad. The attack in Erbil, the center of Iraq's semi-autonomous Kurdish region, killed 4 civilians and wounded 6 others, according to the Security Council of the Kurdish Regional Government. Iran's Revolutionary Guards also said in a statement that it had fired and destroyed a number of ballistic missiles at terrorist operations, including Islamic State targets in Syria. The Pakistani government also said on Tuesday that Iran had struck targets inside Pakistan, killing 2 innocent children and wounding 3 others. Iran identified the targets as bases of the militant group Jaish al-Adil, state media reported. Jaish al-Adil, or Army of Justice, is a Sunni militant group operating largely along the border with Pakistan. Iran fights militants in border areas, but a missile and drone attack on nuclear-armed Pakistan would be unprecedented for Iran. Amid the latest attacks, U.S. Navy SEALs seized Iranian-made missile parts and other weapons from a ship bound for Houthi rebels in Yemen in a raid last week that left 2 commandos missing, the U.S. military said on Tuesday. The raid was the latest incident in which the U.S. Navy and its allies have seized arms shipments bound for the rebels. While boarding the ship in rough seas, a SEAL was swept away by high waves and a teammate went after him. Both are still missing. The U.S. Navy eventually sank the ship carrying the weapons and detained 14 crew members. The Houthis refused to acknowledge the seizure, and Iran's mission to the United Nations did not respond to a request for comment. The United Nations resolution bans the transfer of arms to the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Tehran has long denied arming the rebels, despite physical evidence, numerous seizures, and experts showing the weapons are Iranian. European diplomats said European Union member states have given initial support for the creation of a naval mission by February 19th, at the latest, to help protect the ships. Yemen's vice president said on Tuesday that the current U.S.-led coalition aimed at protecting commercial traffic in the Red Sea is weak due to the absence of regional power centers, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. The Bab al-Mandab corridor concerns the whole world and the region, so regional intervention is key, Aydurus al-Zubaydi said, referring to the narrow strait at the southern entrance to the Red Sea. Zubaydi's breakaway Southern Transitional Council is part of the alliance against the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister underlined the link between the Houthi attacks on merchant ships and the war in Gaza. Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud said the kingdom's priority is to find a way to de-escalate tensions in Gaza through a ceasefire. Strikes by the U.S., coalition, and militants in the Middle East over the past 5 days have raised U.S. fears that Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza could expand, while large-scale military strikes have failed to stop an attack by Yemen-based Houthis on ships in the Red Sea. The United States and its allies struck more than 24 Iranian-backed Houthi positions on Friday in retaliation for the attacks on the ships. But the Houthis continued their naval offensive. Tehran claimed to have targeted an Israeli spy headquarters and struck positions in Iraq and Syria, followed by missile and drone strikes in Pakistan on Tuesday. The chaotic wave of attacks and retaliation involving the United States, its allies, and its enemies showed not only that last week's attack failed to deter the Houthis, but also that the broader regional war the United States has been trying to avoid for months is moving closer to reality, as the Biden administration is expected to announce plans to redesignate the Houthis as global terrorists. It underscores the gravity of the turbulent situation, according to people familiar with the decision, who requested anonymity to discuss the matter ahead of the announcement. Thank you for watching us.